And then also we will have a survey that will pop up at the end. We would encourage you to please fill that out, and you will be entered in a drawing to win a $20 gift card. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Claire.
Welcome, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to learn about additional services Avastone Technologies is able to offer. Regardless of whether your organization has HR on their team or not, I hope you will learn something today about this presentation about GP and myself that can help your organization. Dynamics GP included HR module free starting with the package in 2013 and beyond. And because that's been added, customers have asked about the module, but there wasn't anyone on staff who had a human resource background. So Avastone created the HR lead consultant role, which I'm filling. So let me introduce myself. I come to Avastone with education from the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, a master's from the University of Southern California, and 25 years of experience in human resource management. I've worked in public and privately held companies, unionized and non-unionized companies, manufacturing as well as service industry. So I have a very broad background and experience. My professional credentials within the Society of Human Resource, I have achieved the Senior Professional Human Resource, and I'm now working on their newest credential, which is the Senior Certified Professional. I am also teaching at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay a seminar for seniors on human resource management. So that's enough about me. Let's move into the agenda. The agenda, several things I want to cover today. One is the common HR concerns that many managers have come to me over the past. I think you'll find that you've had these same issues. I will also try to, I will align the process and people aspect, how that works together. And lastly, we'll discuss and tie compliance and best practices to achieving business value. So let's get started. Some of the common concerns that managers have come to me are around interviewing, and it has to do with overtime and terminations. We'll explore each one of these topics over the next 3 slides. So let's start with interviewing. Interviewing is getting the right person in the right job, and it usually is the first way to minimize risk. And the key is interviewing. I can't tell you how many times I've had people managers come to me and said, that's not the person who I interviewed that came to work. I don't know, has that ever happened to you when you thought you hired someone and the person showing up was completely different? I want to offer some tips on interviewing. One is I practice the golden rule, and that golden rule is only asking questions that pertain to the job. You want to be able to learn from that applicant that they have the skills, knowledge, and ability to do the job. And oftentimes, the one fault that interviewers do is they talk more than they listen. So listening is the majority of your role is to listen. So the 80-20 rule is one I also practice, is listen 80% of the time and only talk 20% of the time, because that's the way you'll find out if they're a fit for the job. Another caution is around small talk. Oftentimes we want to have kind of relaxation talk with the person, and oftentimes that will get you in trouble because some of those small talks, whether they're married, where they live, what does their spouse do, those kinds of things really could be misinterpreted when it comes to the hiring decision. So avoid the small talk areas, stay with the weather. It's a safe topic. The one other area I will offer as a tip is being prepared. 2 reasons to be prepared. One is to know what you're going to ask so you can get the skills, abilities, and knowledge. And the other one is be prepared for that unexpected statement from a candidate, such as, I'm 3 months pregnant. Will that keep me from getting the job? And you're stunned. You should always have a programmed answer to answer such questions that are in protected areas. For answer, I would suggest answering it like this way: congratulations. But that information is not relevant to the job. What is relevant is whether you have the skills, knowledge, and ability to do the job. Lastly, a tip is being consistent. Consistency means asking all the candidates the same kinds of questions. I had an example once where a hiring manager asked a question about some mathematical formula, but only asked the female the question and not the males. And that only became apparent after the recruiter went back and asked the candidates, how did the interview go, and that came up. So it could be perceived wrong, even though there was an innocent way of asking the question. So consistency in those questions is important to avoid biases. Let's move on to overtime. Overtime is one of those problematic areas, and it begins with deciding who is exempt and non-exempt. You wouldn't think it'd be such a problem, but it is. It really has to do with not the title, but the actual duties. For example, you may have a supervisor, and the supervisor you would think would be exempt, but they could go either way. It all depends on what their job assignments are. For instance, teller supervisors, since most teller supervisors do most of the same thing that their tellers do, they are then non-exempt and hourly. If they only did supervisory tasks, they'd probably be exempt. The second area has to do with the calculation. The calculation has to be clear. The law only says that you have to pay overtime for hours actually worked. So be clear that hours paid are not necessarily hours worked. You could have paid time off for funeral, vacation, sick, all kinds of other things that may not be included in your calculation. The other problematic area is incidental work. And what I mean by incidental work, it could be practices within a department or individuals that do things that would elicit overtime. What I mean is if you have a person who is hourly, stays at their desk, and kind of through the lunch hour would check on a few emails, do a couple of things, and then doesn't mark their time down. Or you may have someone who takes their laptop home at the end of the day and catches up on emails over the weekend or overnight, just so that when they come back they're all organized and ready to proceed with what they consider real work. The problem comes in is you probably got the best of intentions there, but from an overtime standpoint, those hours are considered hours worked. So and usually that doesn't come to mind or to someone's attention until someone is unhappy. And then they bring that up, saying all these hours that I worked and haven't paid, and then you have to go back and make the correction. And let me tell you, the correction is a painful process, because in the cases that I've been involved in, they went back to look at all the timesheets over a period of time, had the person fill in what hours or days they may have worked, and then had to go back and put those hours in the pay week so you could calculate whether it was straight time or overtime. It was a very painful process. So overtime is a problematic area that most people need to watch. Lastly, terminations. Just the word termination usually raises everyone's blood pressure. It's a high-risk activity that every business faces on occasion. It is high risk because in today's litigious environment, and because employees have easy access to file a suit, it raises concerns. Just look at the internet. You can see by going out to any of the federal or state sites how to file a suit. Secondly, so it's high risk. So secondly is high anxiety. Any manager or person who has to deliver that message gets anxious. The conversation is not something one looks forward to. They often struggle with what I can say, what I can't say, and then it's complicated by imagining what the response will be. I want to pause here just for a minute to kind of talk about employment at will. We all use that term employment at will, meaning it's the relationship between an employee and an employer. Employees can quit at will, and supposedly employers can dismiss at will. But in reality, and it's a big but, businesses don't do that in practical terms because they usually want to have a cause. It's just too high risk to do it without. That brings us to how do we minimize that risk, and that is through documentation. And understand that documentation really has two purposes. It demonstrates to, number one, the individual that they're in trouble, that they need to correct some issue, and number two, it's the paper trail that the employer has done all things possible, or most things possible, to say this behavior has to change or there'll be a consequence. So it's a fair warning system. So if done well, you will be safer at the termination stage than without. So, but I want to move on to look at, here's an example within GP that can document your discipline. On this, you'll see on the on the left side, the list, termination, verbal warning. So you can have that in the spaces. You can also add the document and track how many and how often. So it's kind of unique. I've not seen this in any other software package that I have. But I want you to, we looked at, in the last 3 slides, we looked at the common issues within businesses, interviewing, overtime, and terminations. And you can see that dealing with people and the situations they create for us, there aren't any absolute answers to that. Again, sometimes having an outside source look at these can help business make better decisions. I want to move on to the next process, the next element of our agenda, and it has to do with alignment. We want to bridge between process and people, and I want to demonstrate this through an example that it was brought into. There was an issue with customer service, and so a team of the leadership got together, and I was part of that team. It was in a paper converter that made paper tape. And boy, I don't know if anybody uses paper tape, but I think industry still does, because I've seen boxes wrapped with the string paper tape in it. That's what was made. But the issue was that customers complained that their responsiveness and flexibility wasn't being adhered to. And so there was 2 problems that had to be resolved. One had to do with the process of order flow from the time it came in until it got into the manufacturing floor and then back out. And the other problem was organization within the customer service arena. So the solution was twofold. We implemented a better technology, so there was visibility in the order entry to shipment. That helped the customer service people know where the order was in the process, and they could help their customers then. But what was happening in the customer service arena, it was like arranged in a bullpen, so everyone answered the phone, whoever happened to ring. And they would have people check the checker before they entered the order in the computer. So what we did was rearrange the customer service, aligned pairs of customer service people to the field. So we had an East Coast, West Coast, and Central. So we tied the customer service to that. By changing their job and aligning them with a team of salespeople and customer service, they owned the process, and they could inform their customer and change orders and see where it was in the process. So it was a win-win for both. The customers liked the changes between what the people could do for them and the process, and it was a win for the customer service people. They felt that they had more control over the customer service function. There are other opportunities that HR knowledge and experience can be applied to. One of those we've talked about earlier today was the Fair Labor Standards. That has to do with who's exempt and who's non-exempt. That means who's hourly, who's salary. There's a long list of these compliance issues. Another one has to do with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Oftentimes, managers need some help to understand how they can accommodate someone with a disability and still get the productivity out. Last, I want to just hit on the Affordable Care Act. That is a hot button today because starting next spring, I think it's in March, businesses have to file a 1094 with the IRS and provide employees with a 1095. So that's one thing where I can help navigate these compliance requirements. The other thing has to do with sharing best practices. Recruiting solutions, we all want to hire the best person for the job, and that's the first place you can minimize your risk. The other has to do with self-service. It's becoming a bigger and bigger movement in today's business environment. It means we can be more effective and more efficient if we have the people do it for themselves rather than have someone do it for them. For instance, it would be in enrollment, benefit enrollment, where people can sign up for their own enrollments, pick their own, and it goes right to the vendor of their selection, rather than have it filled out on a piece of paper, goes into HR, and then HR has to load it to the vendor. So self-service is a very practical way of driving accountability. All of the things that we have spoken about throughout this presentation are related to managing risk and being compliant and instituting best practices and aligning process with people to bring value to the business. Measuring value is how we can do it. Measuring, some of the measurements that human resource would use is reducing turnover. No one wants to retrain and reorientate people. Having the same people in the jobs, training them, keeping them, increases engagement because they enjoy what they're doing, increases productivity. No one could fault that. It lowers the risks and lowers costs. Now, moving how Avastone can help you realize these values is another example. The human resource module on the right has a lot of things to offer. For example, the applicant tracking. It can track the number of applicants it has for a job by requisition. It can also track how your resources or your monies are being spent on job boards or internal referrals or newspapers. You want to always measure where you're getting the best value for your dollars spent. It also can help you record your equal employment opportunity information. Many of you have to file annual reports on that. The other screen has to do with benefit view, and that would be where employees can enroll in their benefits. That's a release in the 2015 version. It's in the enhanced level. Avastone Technology can be your HR partner. In some of the ways that can be helped is an on-site assessment. That means looking at practices and consistencies or even record reviews. It would also could be involved with compliance audit. Are you collecting and reporting what you need to? Are the right posters in place? Sometimes it might be the on-call, the HR support that review whether you have an HR team or not. Those situations that you might be around a termination or a religious accommodation or a medical accommodation. Outsourcing is another opportunity. Sometimes you've got an HR person with an extended leave and you don't want to have that void for that length of time. That might be a possibility as well. Special projects could be another thing. Benchmarking against the industry could be a handbook or policy development. Lastly, it would be around training, interviewing skills, critical conversations about and getting good results, or understanding discrimination avoidance. All of these things are possible through Avastone GP and some of the things I've listed on this page. So you'll see my contact and email address at the bottom of the page. I do want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this opportunities that Avastone can offer. And I'll turn it back to Maria.
Thank you, Claire. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day as well just to go over these services that Avastone will be offering. We did have a couple of questions come in during the webinar, and I would just like to go over those with Claire and with you guys. So the first one that came in was, how can I be prepared to remain compliant with ACA?
Well, one of the things Dynamics GP offers, it has solved that question for us. it has in our system collected the information that you need, and it is now writing those links that you can have the report done through GP. So it's one of the advantages of being with GP Dynamics is accomplishing the Affordable Care Act documentation for the end of the year for 2016 reporting.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question that we did have come in was, do I have to pay someone overtime if it was not authorized?
And the answer is yes. If someone has worked, you do need to pay them, but it doesn't mean that you can't discipline the person for not following directions. If you said there's no overtime unless you get permission, you can counsel that person to say don't do it again without, but you do have to pay the person for the work they provided.
Okay. And then the last question we had come in was, when is it necessary to have a second person in the room?
Oh, that's a tough one, because sometimes you just know that you have to have a witness there, and sometimes it's not necessary. Some offices don't have extra people, managers, to be there, and so we can work through those individual situations, but it's not an easy answer because it's all based on the circumstances around that particular situation.
Okay. And again, you know, if you want to speak with Claire, you know, more personally about any of these questions, feel free to contact her with the information we listed, and then, you know, we can go into a little more specific. We appreciate your time today. Again, we will be having a survey after I end the webinar, and I would encourage you to please fill it out. We would love your feedback, and we will put your name in a drawing for a $20 gift card, which is awesome. So on behalf of Avastone Technologies, thanks again to all of our participants, and have a great day, everyone.